Let's go over pivot tables. Pivot tables are a powerful feature of Excel. Pivot tables are a feature that allows tables of data to be rearranged in many ways for different views of the same data. So we can turn a data table like this, that's a bunch of numbers that really means or shows nothing, and we can turn it into this, which is a pivot table and a pivot chart that makes it easy to see, and we can slice and dice all of that data in any way that we need to see different views of it. So let's see how we go from this to this. So we're going to start from scratch with a blank slate. So to create a pivot table, we're going to go to the Insert tab, and on the left side we have the Tables section. So we're going to go ahead and click on the Pivot Table button, and it brings up the Create Pivot Table screen. Now we need to tell Excel the data range or the data table that we are going to use for this pivot table. And our data is actually on a different worksheet. So what we're going to do is we're going to click here to make sure that's in the box, and then we're going to go down to the worksheet labeled Stock Data. Click on that, and you can see Excel update it here, and we're just going to use all of the data that's in this sheet. So we're going to select cell A1, and we're going to hit Control A. So what Control A does is it will highlight all of the cells in this worksheet that actually have data in it. And for this worksheet, that's from cells A1 to K170. We can also tell it where we want the pivot table located. We can create a whole new worksheet just for the pivot table, or we can put the pivot table onto an existing worksheet, which is what we want to do now. We want it to go on the Pivot Tables and Charts worksheet in cell B2. So we'll click OK. And you can see it created a blank pivot table. So what we're looking for with this pivot table is to see the number of stocks that each trader is responsible for that actually have a price to earnings or PE ratio. So the way we accomplish that is we're going to go over here on the right side to the pivot table field list. When you create the pivot table field list should automatically show up. And when you click on the pivot table, just like with graphs, more tabs show up. You have the pivot table tools, and under that you have the options and the design. We'll be going over a lot of what's in this section, but what I want to show you now is if the pivot table field list does not automatically pop up, you go to the pivot table tools, you go to options, and on the right side you have the show section. So that's where you control the field list, whether it's shown or not, the buttons, and whether it's shown or not, and the field headers, whether it's shown or not. In order to start putting data into our pivot table, the first thing we are going to want to do is go over to the pivot table field list and start putting data and labels into our pivot table. Now, these come from the column names on the stock data sheet. So if we go over to the stock data worksheet, and we go all the way up top, you can see the first row has column labels in it, and this is what the pivot table uses for the pivot table field list. So you can see these equal the column headers of the stock data sheet. So the first thing we're going to want to do is drag the trader name down to the row labels, and this puts our trader's name as the row labels. Now, we said that we only want to show stocks that actually have a price to earnings or PE ratio. And we'll accomplish this by dragging the PE column or the PE field label down to the report filter. And we need a column that definitely does not have blank cells in it in order to show every stock that each trader has. So in order to do this, we go to our stock data sheet and we look for a column where there's definitely going to be something in each row for this particular column. Now for this I chose description. Each row of this table definitely has a description, and it does not have blank cells where there's data over here. So we can use the description for our values. And what that'll do, it'll give a count of the description. So it counts the number of stocks, the number of individual stocks that belong to each trader. So we have 169 total stocks, and each of these guys have 42 or 43 of them. Now we said that we only want stocks that have a PE ratio. So what we're going to do is, you notice that the report filter field and the row labels all have filtering abilities. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the report filter for the PE, and we're going to select multiple items. You can select all, and it will not highlight any of them. And this makes it easy if you just want to select one or that type of thing, or you can select all of them. Now, all of these that have numbers have a PE ratio, but some of them have NA for not available. We do not want to count them. So we're going to unclick NA, and we're going to count everything else. So we're going to click OK, and you can see that this filtered the data, so now only 70 of the stocks are showing. And you can see that John and Mark have 20 stocks that they're responsible for that have PE ratios. Steve has 19, and Mike has 11.